students, my name is Arshan and today we will do this poem of your class 7th textbook of NCERT, The Honeycomb. The name of the poem is The Squirrel and the name of the poet is Mildred Bowers Armstrong. So students, when you go to a park with your parents or friends, you might have noticed some very different animals. You might have seen a dog or maybe a cat. But have you ever noticed the cute animal, the squirrel? This squirrel, students, is found in various places. I'm sure you might have seen him and you might have observed him as well. But let us go further in this poem to learn more about him. Also, via this poem, students, we will learn a lot of things. We will learn like how to recite a poem. Also, we will learn to read and understand the poem. Also, students, we will learn the values of sympathy and the moral values of helping the animals as well. So, without further ado, let us start this poem. The poem goes, he wore a question mark for tail, an overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He liked to tease and play. And if he ran around his tree, he went the other way. I will repeat this poem once again, students. He wore a question mark for tail, an overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He liked to tease and play. And if he ran around his tree, he went the other way. Well, students, such a cute and small poem like the squirrel itself. Let us start from the first line. The poet says, he wore a question mark for a tail. Now, students, we can understand that the poet is pointing out the physical attribute of the squirrel. You know, the shape of the tail of the squirrel is sort of like a question mark. And also, the question mark may denote the value of or the feature of curiosity. You know, when we ask a question, we are curious to know the answer. Similarly, is like the squirrel. It is always curious. He wants to know the answers for everything. He goes from one place to another, checking what is that and what is this. So, we can say that yes, the squirrel is very curious and it is wearing a question mark. Then, going to the second line, an overcoat of grey. Now, students, what is an overcoat? An overcoat is a clothing accessory that we wear on our normal clothes to get saved from the harsh winters. We get saved from the winters by wearing an overcoat. Similarly, the animals like squirrel and cats, they have a coat of fur on their bodies. This coat of fur protects these animals from the harsh weather conditions. He sat up straight to eat a nut. Now, the squirrel loves to eat a nut. It is one of the most favorite food of the squirrel. And when the squirrel gets a nut to eat, what does it do? It sits on its hind leg and uses the front legs to hold the nut and eat it with all its focus, very fondly. So, the poet is noting this quality of a squirrel into these lines. He is saying that the squirrel sat up straight with attention and focus to eat a nut, and he noticed that also that whenever the squirrel eats a nut, it sits up on the hind legs. With that, student, we come to the next line, which is, he liked to tease and play. By this line, the poet is referring to the energetic nature of squirrel. As we already know, it is curious as well. The squirrel keeps on going up and down on the tree, from one bush to another, from one tree to another, all over the place. It is always playing and teasing with one another among themselves, and maybe if you are a friend, then they will play with you also. But you will notice this thing definitely for sure, that the squirrel is very energetic. You will hardly find it sitting in a corner or on a place. Otherwise, you may see it always roaming, running around with all that swift energy and swift actions. So, the poet is denoting that fact by these lines. He liked to tease and play, always playing, always teasing among themselves. Very cute animals, right? Then we go to the next line. he says, and if we ran around his tree. The squirrel is referring the tree as the home of the squirrel. And just like we have a home, we love our home. Similarly, the squirrel also has a home, that is the tree. So, we should also try to take care of the home of our friend the squirrel, just like we take care of our own homes. So, the poet is saying that if he ran around his tree, he went the other way. If you are not a friend with a squirrel, it is very hard to touch a squirrel or get in contact with him. The poet is denoting the same fact by these lines. The poet is noting the same fact with these lines, that if you go to a squirrel and you try to come near to him, he will go around the other way. It is his home. He knows all the ways and all the passages of his home. He can go upwards on that tree, or he can go around the tree. So, the poet is denoting all those facts. So, students, this was all about the poem of Mildred Bowers Armstrong, The Squirrel. Now, in this poem, we have learned about a lot of things of the squirrel. We have learned about its home, we have learned about its attire, we have learned about the habits of the squirrel, the eating habits as well. I have some very interesting activities for you people to do on this poem. The first activity is, students, you people can draw a squirrel on a piece of paper. Let the horses of your imagination loose. Draw a squirrel, observe it and draw it in whatever shape you feel like. I am sure you will get some very nice and interesting results. Second activity, students, is that I want you people to go and find a picture of squirrel. Maybe in a newspaper or in a magazine, or maybe even on internet. You can even take the help of your parents or your friends as well. And then, after seeing different pictures of squirrel, can you describe the tail in your own words? Note it down in your notebook. Now, students, come the third activity, that what does the squirrel like to eat? For this activity, students, I would like you people to go to a park with your parents or your guardians and try to take some breadcrumbs or something else with you, and at the first go, take your time and notice, and if you notice any squirrel, don't try to chase him away, right? Take your time, sit for half an hour calmly in a composed manner, and then try to observe the squirrel. What are the habits of the squirrel? How does the squirrel plays with its friend? How does it run from one place to another? And what is it eating and trying to find? You will notice all these things in about half an hour. Try to do this activity, okay? Then, student, comes the fourth activity. You have to find out that how does the squirrel play on the trees. It is very interesting. The squirrels are very energetic animals. They go from one tree to another in a jiffy. They can climb difficult branches in just a matter of seconds. So, try to observe those things and write your observations in your notebook. I am sure after all these activities you will learn a lot of things about the squirrel as well. Now, it's time for some questions from this poem. The questions, students, are like this. The first question is, how does the squirrel tail look like? I am sure you can answer this very easily. We have talked about this in this chapter, or in this poem rather. Then, students, the second question is, what does the squirrel likes to eat? I will give you a hint, students. The squirrel likes to eat its favorite food on its hind leg, sitting up straight. I am sure you will know the answer and you will write it down very easily in your notebook. Then, students, comes the third question, which is, what covers a squirrel's body? Now, to give you a hint for this question, I can say that I wear a sort of a overcoat in winters. Try to notice what does the squirrel wear. You will get your answer. The fourth question is, students, who teases the squirrel? You have noticed the squirrel in the park on the trees. Can you write the answer to this question, that who is teasing the squirrel? His own squirrel friends or some other animals, maybe some big, maybe some small, or some humans. Try to answer this question in your notebook. Now, students, comes the fifth question. What does it do if you run to a squirrel tree? So students, as we already know by this poem that tree is the house of squirrels. So what will it do if you run to a squirrel tree? I am sure that if you follow the activities which we have talked previously about, you will find the answer to this question too. It is very interesting and I am sure you will find it interesting too. Also students, what do you think? Can squirrels be our pet? Would they like to play with children? To answer this or to discuss on this students, I must say that we should treat animals just like our friends. They are also a human beings. You can see in this case of a squirrel, if you give them love, they love you back. If you treat them well, they can be your pet also. So we should always keep the feelings of sympathy and empathy into our hearts. We should always try to help these animals. With this point students, can you people write a poem on some other animals like maybe a cat or a dog, just like Mr. Mildred Bowers Armstrong here has written a poem on a squirrel? Can you people write a poem on some other animal as well? Try to do it students, it will improve your knowledge and your skills as well. Try to write the poem just like Mr. Armstrong has done, by first of all starting the attributes of the animals, then the habits of animals, and then relating the typical details of the animals. I am sure you can do this very easily. Now I will leave the rest of the points to you people. What do you think that what can we learn from a squirrel? Write down in your notebook. Well students, I think this was all about this poem. I will see you next time. Till then, I will take your leave. Bye bye.